This lecture corresponds with chapters 37 through 39 in your Little Brown Handbook. After reviewing this lecture and completing the reading assignment, you should have a better understanding of how to choose the best possible words to communicate clearly and effectively. This is another of the learning objectives for Composition 1. You need to dedicate plenty of time to selecting the best words for the summaries and essays you write in this class. Although this lecture is not about correctness, you need to be aware of certain diction errors. Usage errors occur when students use a word incorrectly, often because they're using a thesaurus to make their essays sound more intelligent. A thesaurus can help you remember synonyms that you already know, but you have to be careful about using words you don't know. For example, you might write, "The class was good." It expresses your meaning clearly, but say you wanted to find a better, more sophisticated word to replace good. A thesaurus might tell you that benevolent is a synonym for good, but it means good-hearted or kind. It would not be an appropriate synonym. You may also use words incorrectly when you use non-standard English, such as the expression had went instead of had gone, or might could, as in we might could go to the movies this afternoon. Sometimes people call expressions like this improper or bad English. Living in Oklahoma, we hear many such expressions, and they often sound just fine to us. In certain circumstances, talking to other Okies, for example, they are just fine. In a college or professional setting, however, non-standard English isn't appropriate. You can't always rely on your intuition when it comes to editing your essays. You have to learn to recognize non-standard English. Homonyms, such as to, or affect with an A and effect with an E, cause word choice errors as well. The usage glossary on page 865 of Little Brown lists several commonly confused homonyms. Finally, most students understand that text messaging and email symbols and abbreviations aren't appropriate for college-level essays. However, some students text so frequently that they automatically use incorrect spellings in their essays. More than one colleague of mine has received papers in which a student has used the letter U instead of spelling out the word you. Of course, you should avoid second person in academic papers whether you spell it correctly or not. The pronoun you is not necessarily wrong or bad, but it usually creates a very informal tone, which is not appropriate for college writing. Other word choices create an overly casual tone as well. Most students know it's not usually appropriate to use slang, to address your readers as dudes, for example, or to use regional phrases like y'all. Colloquial language and cliches, though, are sometimes more difficult to recognize. Colloquial language is simply casual language, the kind of expressions we might use in a friendly email or during a conversation. Enhancers, words like really and very, tend to make your writing more colloquial, but other words are just too informal for an essay. I aced the test, for example, or he maxed out his credit card. Nothing is wrong with these expressions we use in everyday conversation, but for a formal paper, you would want to say, I earned an A on the exam, or he exceeded his credit limit. Cliches are also difficult to catch because they sound familiar, and what sounds familiar to us often sounds good. Besides, cliches seem to make sense. We know in general what a writer means when she says that someone's driving her crazy, or that she wants to hit the hay, or that she has butterflies in her stomach. All cliches. But your job as a writer is to find new ways of expressing ideas or experiences so that readers not only understand precisely what you mean, but also find your writing style interesting. You want to engage them and help them understand exactly what it is you're saying. One way to engage readers is by creating a reasonable, thoughtful tone. The words you select will contribute to the tone you want to establish. Some words create a negative or uninviting tone and therefore need to be avoided. As your text explains, biased, sexist, sarcastic, and slanted language suggests that the writer isn't very well informed or very thoughtful about different groups of people. It's perfectly fine to discuss hot-button issues like sexism or to have strong opinions, but you must adopt the appropriate tone for such discussions. You're being mean-spirited and sarcastic if you write something like this sentence: "How is our bloated government going to foot the bill for health care reform without taxing us hard-working citizens and sending us to the poorhouse?" You can express essentially the same opinion using more balanced language. For example, you could write something like, "Without a tax increase, the federal government simply cannot afford to provide health care for everyone." The other example here: "Horace Mann High School teachers are ignorant fools whose so-called teaching styles reflect a total disregard for their students and undermines any real learning that might take place." That can be revised in a more reasonable tone too. For example, "Many of the teachers at Horace Mann High School are not familiar with their subjects, care little for their students, and assign meaningless busy work." You can find a lot of slanted language in letters to the editor in the Tulsa World or in any other local newspaper. In fact, if you'd like to earn some extra credit, you can look in the paper for these letters that contain the slanted language and type the letter along with the date it appeared in the paper in an email to me, then briefly explain how it could be phrased differently to express the same opinion more appropriately. Remember, too, it's not the opinion being expressed, it's the way the opinion is being expressed. Other kinds of inappropriate language are off-putting for different reasons. Pretentious language occurs when one is being more formal than is required, when one is putting on airs. In an attempt to sound formal, some students go too far and use the $75 word when the $10 word would be just fine. The language in the essay calls too much attention to itself. It makes it appear that the writer is just showing off a big vocabulary, as in the example here. Don't be mistaken, though. Some of the works you read as a student contain a lot of difficult vocabulary, but that doesn't mean the writer's being pretentious. If the $75 word conveys the writer's intended meaning most accurately, it's the right word to use. The same is true with jargon. Jargon is the specialized vocabulary of certain groups. It's often called the technical language. Your professor in a computer concepts class will use computer jargon. I use English jargon. If your audience understands the jargon or needs to learn it, jargon is appropriate. Euphemisms are almost never appropriate for formal writing, but they're indispensable in certain kinds of conversations. You wouldn't say, for example, "I'm sorry to hear your father died." Instead, you would use the euphemism "passed away." It was once considered inappropriate to use the word pregnant in mixed company, so people used euphemisms like "in the family way" instead of the more direct and accurate word pregnant. When euphemisms make your meaning cloudy, or when you are trying to use euphemisms to be tricky or deceitful, a euphemism isn't appropriate. In most academic writing, you want to be direct and avoid euphemisms.